Presented by the Common Sense Institute, welcome to Common Sense Digest, the podcast that seeks to inject a little common sense into Colorado's policy discussion. Here's your host, Earl Wright.
Welcome to the Common Sense Digest podcast. My name is Earl Wright, and I am the chairman of the board of Common Sense Institute and your host today. Transit is one of the most impactful issues in Colorado and actually in the United States right now. The Denver metro area is highly congested with traffic, which feeds environmental concerns. Business and political leaders talk about RTD as a solution to many of the state's problems, from the environment to workforce housing. Joining me today to talk about RTD here in Colorado is Common Sense Institute Urban Infrastructure Fellow Kelly Brough and Daniel Hutton, who is the Vice President of Transportation and Mobility for Denver South. Kelly, Daniel, thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here, Earl.
Thanks, Earl. Great to be here.
And let's start with the basics. The Denver metro region and Colorado as a whole has added millions of residents in the last 5 years. It's one of the dynamic growth stories of the U.S. economy during that period of time. What's that done to the state's transportation infrastructure? And has that had any ripple effects into other public policy areas? Let's start, Kelly, I'm going to let you take a shot at that first. And Daniel, I want you to chime in if you would, please.
This is such a good point, Earl, because I think given the investment we made in fast tracks in this region, when you look at the growth we've had in our population, you would expect to see, yes, we had a pandemic, but you would expect to see a recovery that reflects the rising population. And yet it's been quite the opposite. Growing budgets, and we haven't even recovered from the pandemic, and we were losing ridership before that. So it's a huge challenge. I'll let Daniel talk about how long we're all spending on the roads, but it's more and more time today because, being able to expand your roads has limitations. We can't have the kind of roadways we need to move people like we were used to even 10 or 20 years ago. So this makes the transit systems really, really important. And I look forward to talking more about what did we discover when we really dug into that transit system and how we might address some of the challenges of, frankly, such low ridership today.
Daniel, Kelly referred to maybe you talking a little bit about the traffic since you're in the middle of it, at least as far as I know, I-25 in the south, although I must say, Kelly, I think probably worse than I-25 South is trying to go up to Fort Collins early in the morning and coming back into town in and out. So, Daniel, give us some of your insights, if you would, with regards to traffic and the impact and RTD's solution to it.
Yeah, thanks, Earl. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I am right in the epicenter here, it seems like, of traffic congestion. South I-25, really our service area, Denver South. It's as I understand, from analysis we've done, the heaviest traveled segment of roadway in Colorado. As of now, I think we're looking at 250 to 275,000 vehicles per day. Within the next 10, 15 years, we're looking at exceeding 300,000 vehicles per day. So we're looking at gridlock. So while ridership has declined on RTD, at the same time, even post-COVID, we've really recovered in terms of travel numbers, traffic numbers, traffic congestion. We're back up to congestion levels that we were in 2019, in some cases exceeding those. The travel patterns have shifted a little bit. We're seeing now that Saturday is actually, in this neck of the woods anyway, a more traffic-heavy day than Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, which is pretty incredible because we've always been such a commuter daytime destination here in the South I-25 corridor. That's changing over time. There's more live, work, play. Obviously, there's more retail. We've got Park Meadows, the retail resort. But it's kind of looking like this for the entire metro region. Heavy Saturdays, light on Mondays and Fridays, indicating to us that people are working from home more often on those days. So all sorts of things are changing just in terms of kind of time, travel day, purpose for travel. But what's not changing is traffic congestion still going up.
Okay, I want to push back on that a little bit if I could, Daniel, and Kelly, please.
Sure.
Colorado has a recent CSI study has shown that we have the highest affordability problem as far as starter homes in the United States. Well, the answer, and I drive down I-25 daily, is I see off of County Line, or just I see off of I-187, 185 exit, middle income homes, and probably homes that qualify for the second quartile, maybe third quartile of individuals' income capabilities being built. So it seems to me, Daniel and Kelly, that part of the problem might be, now you tell me if I'm wrong, that the affordable housing that people need is moving more and more away from jobs and more into areas that require transportation, be it the automobile or some other means. Or am I just having a statistical error here by saying I'm using one piece of anecdotal evidence to support my claim?
Well, you wouldn't be alone. Sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
Well, I'm not running for president,
No.
so that's okay.
Yeah, we are seeing that, working with RTD's Transit-Oriented Development Group and just looking at the numbers, typically around light rail. Light rail's a big focus for us here, obviously, in the corridor. Housing around light rail is more expensive. That is accurate. But there is also a fair amount of housing that's popping up within a quarter mile, half mile, in our neck of the woods that could help with the affordability crisis. I think at current, and again, I'm, knowing the South I-25 corridor in the past, it has been more of a daytime destination. We're seeing it more turning into live, work, play. With that coming more housing. At current, we're about 20 to 22,000 multifamily units, essentially, along the corridor. Over the next 10 to 15 years, we're seeing that double. So there is some luxury housing in there, but there is also some affordable. Whether or not that's speaking to your anecdotal experience, I can't say, but we're trying.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will ease into the future.
Kelly, I want to try to build on your expertise as the president of the chamber. And by the way, you did a terrific job from everybody I've talked to. Thank you for your service there. It seems to me when I came out here in 1978, moved our corporate headquarters here, downtown Denver was the vibrant area of business. And now it seems that you've got, 3 or 4 vibrant areas. And last time I heard, and you correct me on this, the Denver Tech Center is actually a bigger business center than downtown Denver. Whether that's true or not, I know there's a lot of different business centers. How does that play in what RTD is trying to do?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of issues around it, right? One is downtown isn't our only economic center. There's some real positives in that because companies often need very different assets to be successful, and our region can provide those assets, whether you have to be close to a train or an airport or down south where maybe you have a little more land or a little less density. That said, we built a hub and spoke system, and we built it with this notion of we have a central business district. And we do. It's in recovery still. There's no question about it, but we definitely still have that. But we also now have way more remote working, and people, everybody will tell you coffee shop sales in neighborhoods have gone up because we're staying closer to home and we're going to meet people for coffee in our local coffee shop instead of downtown or the tech center. And so we do have to recognize and probably think about how do you modify a system that's fixed rail to recognize this distinction. And, when Daniel was talking about the traffic on the roads, I'm often driving somewhere and I think, where are all these people going if they're supposed to be working from home? Why are they on the roads? Of course, I'm one of them. And so traffic patterns have changed a great deal. That said, I think this is where we really have to think about density. And listen, not all of us want density, but that we know we have a large group of particularly young people who like living in a more dense environment. I think, Earl, one of the huge issues to achieving that is not that our cities aren't committed to building that density around our transit stops. Almost all of our cities are committed to it. It's really, you can't build a for sale dense product in this state because of liability issues that we have on our books. Other cities have about 20% of their housing are condos or for sale multifamily. We're at 4%. That's a real problem at these stations. That's a more affordable product. It allows you to get into home ownership, to your point, without having to drive till you qualify, but having a more dense, more affordable product around these stations. Our legislature has to change that. It is part of the solution to addressing ridership on RTD as well, I think.
Let's stick with ridership, because you're the two of you are all of a sudden, as far as I can tell, saying, hey, the ridership issue with regards to Colorado. By the way, on ridership, I was astounded by some of the ridership numbers around the country. 57% of the inhabitants, and you can imagine this, in Manhattan, use a subway system. And even Philadelphia, which I can't imagine, 30% of the people in Philadelphia use their mass transit system. And what is it we use? Did I see a four fingers go up? Kelly, is that what you?
4% fare recovery.
Fare recovery, okay.
Is all we're getting. But we are one of the lowest in terms of, one of the answers, Earl, is, well, the pandemic. But when you look at the recovery of other transit systems like Kansas City, everybody's like, well, we're Western and we had the pandemic. Well, others have recovered not only what their ridership was pre-pandemic, but they've exceeded it today. So there's something else going on here. And that's where we really spent time trying to dig into what else is happening in our system.
Okay, let's talk about ridership for a minute. We have this terrific system up down I-25, and I see, except for Avs games and Nuggets games, and I guess a few minutes during the morning or evening, they don't have many people. So what do we have to do to increase ridership? You mentioned one thing, and that is at the stations, have more density with regards to housing and the apartments or whatever it might be, more density there, so people will be willing to live there and then ride the RTD facilities, light rail or whatever, to job. What else do we need to do, guys?
I think this is a safety issue. And there's two ways we have to think about safety. One is the real data on crime and what's happening. And the other is, your perception. In New York City, I'm going to submit to you, there's nefarious characters getting on those trains.
I can testify to that.
Yeah, I've sat next to them. But I felt pretty safe because there were a whole bunch of me's there too, right? In our system, you could be the only one in the car with someone that you don't feel comfortable with. And that creates a very different situation for your feelings of safety. So this ridership and safety go hand in hand. RTD's taken it seriously, but I think this is where we really have to explore, how do you make sure any peace officer in the state of Colorado has the ability to try to address safety issues, and RTD officers can come off RTD property when they need to make sure people aren't kind of getting away with bad activity because you lose jurisdiction. When you leave RTD property, the police officer maybe can't follow you, or vice versa. And RTD starting to...
Wait. Are you telling me that if I'm being followed by somebody and I think the policeman is following somebody that might impact my safety, that once I cross a certain line and get on RTD, be it a bus or a light rail, they can't help me? And even if there's not an RTD police officer around?
Yeah, so the Denver Police Department and RTD is formalizing a relationship with Denver to change this, but people figured out, if I cross Civic Center and get off Denver and go into RTD property, it's now an RTD police officer who has to deal with me. And this is where we just have...
whether the RTD officer is there or not.
Yeah. And so those kinds of relationships, I think, could really help support RTD in what they're trying to accomplish to make it safer. And at the same time, I think they got to blow out every option to increase ridership because it's the combination of those two things that will help address both real safety, but also perceptions of safety.
Dan, you have any comments you want to add there? I have a follow-up question for the two of you.
I sure do. Have a few. And yeah, that's correct with my understanding with the RTD police force, but that is within the city and county of Denver limits. So as you get out to other cities, counties throughout the district and the suburbs, our neck of the woods, once you get to Greenwood Village, Centennial, City of Lone Tree, RTD police force has a little more leeway there with enforcement, but it still is kind of a parceled up map. And Kelly's right that the number one issue that I have heard about from our stakeholders, I mean, it is safety and security. That's a huge one. But when you talk about ridership, once you can figure out the safety and security issue that RTD is working on, they're bringing in this police force in-house, hiring lots of folks, you still got the issues of speed, reliability, and frequency, of service. Speed's a huge one. That's a tough one for the metro region because the commuter rail, which is, the fastest of lines, that gets up 79 miles per hour. Commuter rail in Japan's 200 miles an hour. And normally you could be closer to the station there. And when users think about speed, they think about speed door to door, not just train stop to train stop. Speed's tough. So that gets back to, working on quality. But reliability and frequency, those are things we have to work on. Reliability's been really tough.
Do we have an issue on that? I was not aware of that. Reliability, rail or on the bus system?
Both actually. Reliability has been an issue the past few years, and it has gotten a little better, but it ties back to the operator shortage. This is also an issue it's a macro issue when it comes to transit agencies. It's hard to get operators on board to drive a bus. It's a really demanding job, and to keep them there, to retain them, really difficult. So that's something that's been an issue. RTD is working on that. Hopefully that gets better. And that ties into frequency too. There's also some deferred maintenance issues that RTD's been working on. There's some reconstruction going on downtown of some of the lines. They're also along the southeast line. There's this coping panel project, which is kind of complicated, but it's really talking about these cap panels that go on the retaining walls up and down the southeast line. That's been going on for a couple years now. So this summer, RTD is going to be down to 1 train per hour in each direction along the southeast line. That goes until September. So frequency, for a user, you're used to 15 or better minute headways in most other kind of transit areas in the world that work well successfully. We're going to be down to once an hour for a while. Now, RTD is hiring for police force. They're kind of rebuilding service. They're working on reliability. They're working on this deferred maintenance. So I do think it's going to take a little while to earn that trust back with a lot of riders, but eventually we'll start to get there. But there are lots of issues, and I agree, safety and security is top of the list.
As I was preparing for this podcast, I was asking, questions like, what are the non-economic factors that contribute to success of it? And that does not make me an expert that I did research, by the way. The one thing that was number one and number two was ridership patterns, but number two is coverage and connectivity. Do we have an issue with regards to coverage? And by the way, the third was reliability and frequency, Daniel, which you were just mentioning, that if you want to have success, it sounds to me that we're clearly not providing that. But how about coverage and connectivity? Do you have a sense about our coverage and connectivity? Can a person who wants to use mass transit and go from, Westminster to Denver or to the Denver Tech Center, is this really a reliable source of transportation back and forth to work?
I guess what I would say is it's a reliable source, but probably the challenge is not getting from the Westminster station to a station in South, metro area. The challenge is you had to get yourself to that Westminster station, and then you got to get yourself to wherever you're going from that other station. And that's where life gets tough. And this is where listen, as gas goes up, as roads get more clogged, it starts to make the system more appealing. I vote we actually make it a, more reliable, shorter period of time, not just out of, misery. I chose this other crappy choice that you all gave me. So I think this is where we have to say, all right, RTD is probably good at what I'd call the long haul. This is where you're trying to get from one end to the other, where we're still not good as first and last miles. And I think it is really clear when you look at ridership, it varies in the region significantly. And so what it says to me is it requires different solutions in different parts of the region. And this is where I feel the coordination between our local governments, our cities, and RTD has to improve. We got to figure out what does that last mile or first mile really look like? And we have to try new and different ideas. And I would say this is a space where we could help RTD be a little faster to pilot an idea, to allow pilots to look different throughout the region. But to me, they should have one goal, and that's increase ridership. Frankly, we would not lose money if we made the damn thing free for everybody today. 4% of the revenue comes from Farebox. You could say it's free for everybody, and let's just see what it takes to get that ridership up. Because a huge part of what we're facing, Earl, is we have trains with hardly anyone on them. It costs almost exactly the same to run the dang thing. And if we could just start to bump our numbers a little, I think what you'd start to also see is people say, this has value. Your head times improve, your connections improve. But we got to figure out how you make that local government a closer connection to RTD. This isn't in my report, but I would recommend a change in governing structure.
My takeaway, and I'm sure others listening to this may have a different takeaway. It'll be fun to see what kind of response we get. What I think I hear you saying, Kelly, and Daniel, you're contributing to it too, is that, we have maybe come up with half a solution or whatever fraction of a solution to mass transit. We need to maybe rethink it as to what mass transit we need for the Front Range. You mentioned the last mile. Yeah, I totally identify with that, because in the various areas that I know about the city, you may go into that work location, but you may be 2 miles away from where you want to go to work. And that you end up driving because of you don't want to walk that 2 miles from the train station. So you're talking about a more holistic approach to mass transit for people within a community, Kelly, and I think, or am I overreading that?
No, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
And you're also suggesting, and not being in the report, as you mentioned, that maybe to make this work, we need a different governance structure. How about a planning structure? Or is that part of the governance?
Yeah, I probably put those two things together, right? This is where you need a board that oversees RTD who is lockstep with those local governments and the decisions they're making, so that there's no daylight between them, right? Today, mom and dad are not lining up for the rest of us as their children. If mom says no, we go to dad, and it's super frustrating. I personally think this is where appointments of our local elected officials who we can hold accountable for the decisions they make at RTD and the decisions they're making for their city would make sure we don't have daylight between the two.
Daniel, is it possible that we might be looking at or measuring the wrong thing? Should we just be ridership? Yeah, I understand that. But should we also maybe be looking at the idea of coverage? Do we have the kind of coverage in light of what people need? I don't know. I'm just reflecting some of what I've read with regards to success in other parts of the country and other parts of the world.
Yeah, good questions. I mean, back to your example of, I guess, Westminster to the DPC, say, there is coverage in the metro region, but how much time and patience do you have? That's kind of where we are right now. That's the tough part. In the transit world, a lot of the time, I mean, the big tug of war is kind of ridership versus coverage. They have different implications, kind of spreading the peanut butter too thin is how we call it in terms of coverage. If you have too much coverage, of which, RTD is the largest geographically transit agency in the United States, it's a wide swath of area. With coverage, too, I mean, we have to make sure that we meet equity goals. There's ADA compliance, Title VI compliance, these really important kind of human services, right? That's a big part of coverage, and that's important. But getting back to ridership, if we can manage to get better coverage with partnerships, some of which we're working on, some of which RTD is working on, I'll get to in a second, then I think we can make strides. For example, CDOT and the bus staying. They're helping RTD augment service already. So with this coping panel project we're hearing about along the Southeast line, CDOT's now getting involved, trying to offer additional bus service along the corridor to get to downtown, get to other destinations, while we're only going to have 1 hour headways on the Southeast rail line. There are also localized partnerships, kind of micro transit services, first and last mile that we talk about, We are partnering with the city of Lone Tree, with RTD, with Douglas County, on what's called a link on demand. So it's like an Uber with a minivan. You can get you all around. We're getting really good service and ratings in our neck of the woods. But there are also other localized services. There's the hop, skip, and jump up in Boulder. There's the Inglewood Trolley. There are these other partnerships going on where I think we can still meet those coverage goals. It just might not be RTD. RTD's trying to, and I think they need to, get back to focusing on those core major intra-regional services that we're seeing, the light rail, the commuter rail, regional bus, that sort of thing, and work on partnering with the locals.
I have to ask the two of you, are we trying to use a quarter for what a dollar takes to accomplish what needs to be done? Are we trying to go on the cheap when in fact that's just not reasonable in light of if you're really going to solve the issue and make mass transit something that is accepted, and you have a quadrupling of the ridership, which is what I think the goal is, at least the state said that should be the goal. Do we really have the budget to make that happen?
RTD just hit, $1 billion annually in their budget. When you look at these other systems and the kind of ridership they have, Earl, I got to believe this is possible. And with technology and the innovation, I really believe we can. We're not kind of shortchanging ourselves today.
Are we just spending the money? Kelly, I'm putting you on the hot plate here. Are we just spending money the wrong way and the wrong priorities? Well, let me put it another way. Are there other ways in which we could spend those dollars that might accomplish our goal?
Listen, we know we can't have everybody driving in a single occupancy vehicle and make this thing work. We know that. We've invested in a train system, whether people think, today they're like, should we have done it? My answer would be we maximize the investments we've made. And I fundamentally believe together we can do that. But it's going to require that we use innovative technologies and that we get very creative about how we solve and address these issues. We have to do this for so many reasons. And it's not just transportation reasons, Earl, right? Air quality is affected by this. How we grow and develop our land use affects our water needs. There's lots of reasons why I'm going to continue to argue having a transit system that works is an imperative to our future. Today, we just got to figure out how to take the one we have and really make it work.
SB 24-230 levies oil and gas fees and requires 80% of them to be paid to the transit for RTD. Is that a solution for the dollars needed to help us create what we're talking about, what's needed here?
I think it's a potential solution. RTD's budget has been, or cost of doing business anyway, has been rising like everywhere else. Transit is an expensive business. I mean, you think about having to consider service provision, budgeting, communications, operations, tremendous human resource requirements, liability, planning, the list goes on and on and on. It could be a potential source. And kind of a major distinction about that bill, my understanding, is that it could go to RTD as well as other local agencies. So again, if, it's a little bit of a value judgment whether that specific money goes to RTD, but if it goes to transit in general, could help out rural providers, could help out suburban providers, could help out some of these localized communities like City of Lone Tree, like Westminster, like Thornton, other communities, help them fund transit to help RTD. So it can be done directly or indirectly, but yep, transit is an expensive proposition, and it will continue to be. Costs are bound to go up, especially across the country as we look at more and more deferred maintenance over time.
Either one of you maybe been concerned that this transit is contributing to the cost of living here in the Front Range, which has been going up faster than other parts of the country, and our in-migration has been impacted by it, that this is a solution or is it a problem?
Yes.
That's an or question, Kelly. It wasn't an and.
Hey, listen, I don't think transit drove cost of living. We're underbuilt in housing. We have a higher demand. We're one of the most We had been one of the most attractive places for people to move and live. The quality of life here is amazing. I think our challenge is our transit system.
I'm the president of the Chamber of Commerce.
We have over 400 days of sunshine a year. Our challenge is, our transit system didn't evolve at the same pace. And to Daniel's point, I got to highlight, being able to have resources for those first and last miles for local communities, which is what the dollars could be used for, the new money coming in. I think that is where we really focus, because when you look at operational efficiency for RTD, they're in the top half in the nation. It's one of the few metrics where we are, comparing more favorably. So it doesn't really answer your question, Earl, but that's as good as I'm going to do.
Daniel, can you add that maybe you mentioned the last mile, and Kelly has mentioned that as far as making the RTD system work better, particularly the light rail. If you were the benevolent, omniscient dictator for mass transit, what one or two things would you try to do?
Well, first of all, dynamic, cost-efficient microtransit. So basically shuttles is what we're talking about. Small shuttles that coordinate well with the light rail station, or the light rail itself, coordinate schedules, get people to and from where they need to be. We're also seeing a lot of uptake and picking up of micromobility, which really what we're talking about is e-bikes and e-scooters, specifically e-bikes, private ownership. Now, you see a lot of e-scooters, in dense places downtown. Some of them are down this way too. And sure, they can be polarizing. Scooters make it a little tough. But typically, for those rental systems, you're talking 75% of rides in those rental systems are scooters, 25% e-bikes. When you look at private ownership, that flips. We're seeing much higher numbers in e-bikes. And e-bikes are great for this type of environment, places where you need first and last mile. Honestly, people talk about the last mile. They have been for years. A lot of people, if you look at it from a user experience standpoint, they're really only put up with a quarter mile. So if you've got a 3-mile bike ride to take and you call it a last mile, it's just not going to take it. But you throw a motor on an e-bike or a bicycle, now you might have an actual solution. So I think those are the top two. I think we're going to see them proliferating more. But we also need better infrastructure at the stations, mobility hubs, so kind of combining modes, have bus staying, light rail, e-bikes, e-scooters, all this stuff in one place. And then better just bicycle pedestrian infrastructure in general. Down here where we have a lot of major arterials, big streets, Arapahoe Road, Dry Creek, County Line. Nobody's riding a bicycle on those. Even if we put a bike lane on, no, I would suggest people don't. But we do have some secondary and, local roads that are really good candidates for this. And I think a lot of communities around the metro area are the same way.
Well, Kelly, I'm going to give you a chance to be that omniscient, benevolent dictator and saying what would be one or two things that you would like to see done in the next decade. Notice I gave you a timeline much better than Daniel's. So in the next decade, to have us have a better mass transit system.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we have to set goals around ridership. And, RTD, I think, has been hesitant to do this because it's often focused on fare collections. And I'm like, just focus on ridership. And I think when you start to do that, we'd start to become more innovative and creative about all the strategies that could actually increase ridership. And then the second thing I'd say is figure out how you have seamless coordination with our local governments that are part of this district, where our mayors are saying, we take responsibility. We're connected to the decision. Maybe we're even making the decision for RTD so that we're not kind of tripping over each other or making investments that don't have value for a local community or the best value for a local community. Those are the two things. And then, of course, I think we address safety head on. I think we acknowledge whether we want you to drive one of our buses and you're not willing to do it because you don't feel safe, or we want you to ride in the thing, that we come up with a lot of approaches to increase safety and increase your comfort. And I think we're capable of doing this if we put our heads together and don't treat it like RTD, you're the sole responsibility for solving all of these. But RTD starts to lead the work that brings us together as a region and a community to say, what could we do that increases safety and increases comfort? And then, of course, I would make sure every young person rides for free as long as they're in school. And this starts to form behaviors and habits. and it makes the system less intimidating when you become an adult. Those are some of the things I would do right out of the gate.
Kelly, Daniel, I can't thank you enough for your candor and answering a meandering set of questions on the topic, but you guys are very tolerant. And thank you so much for what you do for the community. And it's a pleasure to have been with you today, Kelly, Daniel.
Thank you, Earl. This was great. And well done, Daniel.
Thank you, Kelly and Earl. Yeah, this has been fantastic. Thanks for having me along.
Thank you for listening to the Common Sense Digest. For more on today's topic, as well as our research on the most pressing public policy issues facing Colorado, please visit commonsenseinstituteco.org. The preceding episode, along with all others, is available on podcatchers everywhere or on our website under the podcast tab. Our technical producer is John Ekstrom and Deft Communications. This has been a production of the Common Sense Institute.